going to call this meeting to order. Ms. Fleming, if you would take roll call, please.
Kathy Cox? Here. Colin Ward?
Here.
John Maston?
Here.
Pat Rooney?
Here.
Nicole Cohen?
Here. Please stand for the pledge, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody this evening and thank you for taking the time to attend our school board meeting. It's nice to see it almost full. We're going to change the order of the agenda just slightly. We're going to do this ongoing, but we're going to start this evening and we're going to open up with the call to public. So if there's anybody in the audience that would like to address the board, if you would kindly come to the podium, and if you haven't had a chance to fill out our form so we have your contact information, if you could do that and give it to Mrs. Fleming, that would be great. So I just want to make sure that we don't have anybody who would like to address the board this evening. Okay, now we're going to move on and we're going to ask the president of the LHCEA, Lake Havasu City Education Association, Ms. Carol Nowakowski.
All right. And Mary Todd, I'm standing over here.
You can stand over there, that's fine.
Talk last time. All right, Madam President, members of the board, directors, staff, parents, and students, and citizens. This past week was spent learning how a bill becomes a law. Because from my memory, the only recall I had was a rolled up piece of paper on the steps of Congress. So I reached out to some friends of mine and said, how does this happen? And we reviewed a little bit, and now we understand that we have a handful of bills that we've been following through the education committees and now the multiple caucuses. We will be keeping a closer eye on them this week because rumor has it they will be hitting the floor. We are hopeful of the passing of HB 2377. That's the More Learning, Less Testing bill. My favorite part of it is direct quote, direct measures of academic progress is to include academic growth and proficiency, and outlines the options of calculating both, which in the past hasn't been. We are also watching the Empowerment Scholarship Account bills, the HB 2394, HB 2465, and SB 1431, all with similar language, but coming from both directions. These are known as voucher bills. They have both left their education committee with a 6-5 vote from the House and a 4-3 vote from the Senate. We have been asked and strongly encouraged to contact Representative Cobb and Mosley for a request for a no vote. These are bills that are asking for an expansion on what currently exists, the ability to bank the dollars that they receive, and to remove the cap. These are public dollars that are going to be used for private education. These are public dollars that are going to be taken away from already underfunded public education. And they have very little accountability. So I'm urging all of you tonight to either go home and make a phone call, I have the numbers, or you can easily go on to ArizonaLedge.gov and you can get the emails, you can get the phone numbers, and you can make all your contacts that way. I would encourage you to also contact Senator Borelli, but unfortunately he is on the bill of SB 1431. So that was a little concerning for me. So,
Do you want to give out the phone numbers?
yes, I can give out the phone numbers. For Regina Cobb, 602-926-3666. 3126. And for Paul Milsey, 602-926-4844. And if you haven't read a letter to the editor, you're done. He has a good letter to the editor.
Thank you,
Yes, I'm
Carol.
done. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to action items. 3.1, approval of our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Madam President, I move approval of the consent agenda.
Right. Terry, will you do the roll call?
Sorry, I didn't hear who seconded.
Oh, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Manston,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to new business because we have no old business. So we're going to move to 5.1, and I believe Mr. Becker is going to present that.
Actually, I'm going to...
Oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Allie Robinson, and I'm here with Mrs. Balboni, Thea Hookie, and Cammy Kolb. We're members and advisors of Key Club, and today we are asking the governing board for permission to travel out of state for our yearly Southwest District Convention for Key Club in El Paso, Texas.
The convention will be March 24th through 28th in El Paso, Texas, and we will be staying at the Marriott Hotel. A few things that we will be doing is attending workshops for officers and members, attending workshops to learn about leadership opportunities and gain on our leadership knowledge, learn about new amendments and vote on district bylaws, and vote for our next year's district board. And basically, we go to a bunch of workshops and just learn as much as we can to be better next year.
We will depart the high school at 4:30 a.m. on Friday, March 24th, 2017, and return by 11 p.m. that Sunday, which is the 26th, by using a charter bus, which will be nice. The cost for each member is about $353, which is split 3 ways. The members will pay 1/3, the Kiwanis will pay 1/3, and the club pays 1/3. This money includes the registration, hotels, meals, and transportation.
Okay, we are asking for your approval, but any questions?
Go ahead.
Let's go into discussion before we go to questions. So do I have a motion to approve the Lake Havasu High School Key Club student travel to the Southwest District Convention in El Paso, Texas from March 24th to 26th, 2017?
So moved. Second.
Okay, now discussion. Do you have any questions?
Do you have any male chaperones, Bill?
Yes, we do. Pat Myers, which is helping us this year at the high school as a sub, and her husband, Rich Myers, were with Telesis. They're going with us, so we're sharing because he didn't have a female and I did not have a male, so we're sharing the chaperone duty.
And what are you paying for the charter bus in full?
In full, $4,969.
Just for clarification, because our dates say March 23rd to 27th, so it is the
It
24th
is,
through
yes.
the
'Cause
26th.
we were looking with the charter bus and they weren't sure on the time for that days on
Okay.
what they would get us compared to the convention times with the time change. So that's why we had to put in for longer versus the shorter.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Pat?
I call for the question.
Terry? Kathy called for the question.
The approval?
The approval.
The approval of Lake Havasu High School Key Club student travel to Southwest District Convention in El Paso, Texas.
Correct.
You want
Yes.
a vote?
I already made the motion.
Yes.
Seconded. No.
I'm sorry.
Discussed. That's okay. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I had
Ellen
Robert's
Ward?
Rules of Order when I was a Girl Scout.
Alan Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen,
Yes.
and I cannot see the board count, so it's hard for me to know what's going on. I'm sorry.
Thank
Thank you.
Sorry. I can only partially hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move to action item 5.2. And I believe, I don't know if Mr. Becker's doing that.
Delegates well.
Hi, I'm Valerie Rose Johnson. I'm the advisor for the Lake Havasu High School Educational Tour Group. I almost said Key Club. I did that for a long time. So the Educational Tour Group, and I'm asking for approval to take the group to England, France, and Spain in the summer of 2018. We would leave approximately May 31st and return June 13th. EF, the company we hired, does ask for a 4-day window for airline flights, but at this point our trip is May 31st to June 13th of 2018. Usually I just read this. She didn't read, so I'm going to read. I can't do this. It's the parent's responsibility to take their child to and pick him or her up from the airport in Las Vegas. The cost is $4,715. That includes the airfare, the hotel, 2 meals a day, the excursions, in any extensions that we have. The funding sources are going to be the parents' funding. The club does fundraising. They can use tax credits for this trip, and they also have a parent association that does fundraising.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the Lake Havasu High School Educational Tour Group to travel to England, France, and Spain from May 31st, 2018 to June 13th, 2018?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion? Any questions?
I noticed you've got 2 female chaperones. Do you have male chaperones provided for this?
I do right now. At the time of this paperwork, no, I did not.
I'm just a little worried, overseas, strange area.
Mm-hmm.
No problem.
Okay.
And is there a percentage as to how the funds are paid out of these different areas?
No.
Okay.
No, it depends on how much fundraising you can do individually, or if your parents just want to pay for it straight out.
Okay.
Are there any protocols, like emergency protocols, when you're traveling internationally? Like, does everybody have embassies loaded on their phone? Or I'm just curious because I worry about those kind of things.
We do discuss the embassy and what happens if you lose your passport. Excuse me. We also talk about how to find your way around. The idea is that we're together all the time as a group, and we have parent meetings 5 times a year to discuss the policies and procedures on the trip. And I think I've answered your question, but I feel like I'm missing something.
I just wanted to know that you all are aware of where the embassies are when you're out of the country with the kids.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the chaperones, the advisors.
Yes.
Not necessarily the kids, because I'm assuming you're all together at all
Correct.
times. So.
How long have you been doing this totally?
With the educational tour group?
Yeah,
This is my 9th year.
and then it was done before you started doing it, too, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it's nothing new.
Nothing new.
All right. Got a lot of confidence in you.
Thank you, Mr. Ernie.
What do you do if you have a serious discipline problem with a student in a foreign country?
The procedure is depending on what the discipline is, but if it were serious, the parents would be called, collect, and EF would make arrangements for them to fly home at the cost of their parents.
Any other questions?
And you never had a problem then?
No, we haven't.
So it looks like 1 to 15. Right now there's, and others as needed. So right now there's just 2.
There are currently 3.
3.
Yeah. When the paperwork was done,
There was only.
there were only 2.
Gotcha. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. Terry?
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen,
Yes. Okay, action item 5.3, and I believe Is it Jan Esme?
Good evening, Madam President and fellow board members. My name is Emma Key, and I'm the president of the Health Occupation Students of America Club at the high school. I'm here with Jan Esme, our advisor, and Angelina Hudson, one of my board members. And we're here seeking approval for the HOSA club at our school and the dual enrollment medical terminology class to travel to the Bodies exhibit in Las Vegas, Nevada on March 31st, 2017. It will cost $24 per person. 39 students will be going on one bus. Miss Esme, as well as Mrs. Becker, the dual enrollment class instructor, and 2 other high school teachers will be coming along as chaperones. It will give us the opportunity to see the actual human bodies and specimens that people do not have the opportunity to see in the school here.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the Lake Havasu High School HOSA and dual enrollment medical terminology class travel to the Bodies exhibit in Las Vegas, Nevada on March 31st, 2017?
I so move.
Seconded.
Any discussion or questions?
You've got $24 for meals, lunch. What's our vehicle cost on that? Do you know that?
We're taking a CTE bus,
Okay.
so that'll come out of CTE funding.
Okay.
Any other questions? You know, I was reading about HOSA and I was trying to figure out what that stood for. That was not easy to find. It's like buried in the deep, dark history of the organization way back from like the late 60s. So, but that looks like a fun trip. Well, if there's no other questions, we will go ahead and call for the vote. Thank you very much.
John Maston,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yeah.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Okay, action item 5.4. I'm not sure who's presenting. Is it Kelsey Ballard? Okay.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. I am here requesting for LHHS student government to take an out-of-state trip to California to Six Flags. I have with me 3 students. So I have Ryan Henderson, ASB president, Nick Cada is a senior class representative, and Ray Grace is a junior class representative. As many of you know, we just finished planning our state convention for the whole state of Arizona. And with that, AASC was very impressed, and they actually allocated some funds for us to reward these students. So I'm going to let Ryan Henderson kind of explain the hours that they had to work in order to make this state convention possible.
So, sorry, I'm a little bit taller. So with State 2017 came a lot of planning. Our council had to meet various times outside of school. We basically treat student council like it's a lifestyle and a club and a class. But we met multiple times outside of school. We put in so many hours into making this convention of 2,000 students from around Arizona possible. And it really was a lot of work, and I think it really paid off. We've heard countless words of appreciation for the convention, and we couldn't be happier of how it turned out. So we're so excited to possibly have this opportunity to reward our council, and I'm just beyond proud of every single rep and every single person in my council. So,
thank you.
We would be departing LHHS on March 27th, and we would be returning on March 27th as well. AASC would pay for the tickets, and students would be in charge of paying for their own food and souvenirs throughout the trip.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do I have a motion to approve the Lake Havasu High School Student Council trip to Valencia, California on March 27th, 2017?
So moved.
A second?
Seconded.
Any discussion or questions? I have no questions.
Just in relation to the question that was asked about the cost for a bus, and you asked it on the previous one, we did find out that we charge our school for a trip of $14.95 for the bus. It runs up to $1,500, and that would be for the day.
Now, on behalf of the school board, I think we all want to commend you. You got a lot of publicity, great publicity. It made the town look great. It made Lake Havasu High School look great. And I can only imagine the planning that went into that. It's just, it makes my head spin. So good for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, I'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Okay, action item 5.5, and I believe Mrs. Mulligan is going to present.
Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended the governing board approve the Capturing Kids' Hearts training on May 31st through June 1st, 2017, provided by the Flippin Group for up to 60 Lake Havasu Unified School District staff members. This free Capturing Kids' Hearts training was received as a part of Thunderbolt's National Showcase School Award and is valued at $25,000. This training will focus on new staff members at our Capturing Kids' Hearts schools who have not yet received training to ensure fidelity and implementation. Our Capturing Kids' Hearts schools are Thunderbolt, Oro Grande, Smoke Tree, Starline, Jamaica, and Nautilus. And there is no cost to the district for this training.
Do I have a motion to approve the Capturing Kids' Hearts training for the Flippin Group?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion or questions?
We've done this in the past, have we not?
Correct, we've always had to pay before. The district has never paid, it's always been community donations.
What were our historic costs for that?
It's $550 per teacher
Okay.
for a 3-day training.
Is this hands-on training, or is this hands-on training or online training?
It's a trainer, you're in front of a trainer, so it's face-to-face.
And past this year, do you anticipate bringing back an additional action item, say next year, that would continue this training program?
I hope so. But normally we are, from our community donations, normally we are finishing up, so maybe we have 3 teachers that left in the dream world, and then we would train them. But it just depends on the needs of the district. You know, we did get together, the Capturing Kids' Hearts principals got together last year, I believe, and really sat down and made a plan for sustainability, because it is expensive, but it's a 3-day, now it's a 2-day training, but so we made a decision together to say, well, let's maybe have a training every other year. And what I learned this year with so many new staff members is you really can, the processes that are in place for the teachers who have been trained, they really do touch everybody. So we've done okay. Not like 100% training, but moving forward, I believe it would be for just to finish the a couple of teachers at a time, which I don't know that comes before the board, but it is ongoing, and you really do need the training to understand the depth of what the process is going to be. So
I appreciate you sending out the data.
thank you.
I do want to share that the data that was on your table today updates the district tolls.
Oh, for the bottom 2?
Right, so we wanted to get that information to you.
I'll put it away because I thought I already had it.
So the total for 15-16 was 65, and then for 16-17 to date as of 2/16 was 44. So the ratios have gone way down in terms of those particular numbers.
Now, those were just the severe
Yes.
discipline cases? Okay.
Those were the ones that were brought forward for extended suspension.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have one now. This is an ongoing thing, and like you said, it is expensive. Have you looked into the possibility of having one of our person schooled as a trainer to hold these classes right here locally?
Well, you do have to have a trainer through the Flippin Group, and it's a pretty. I was actually invited to be a trainer a couple years ago, and I didn't make it. And I believe in it, but it's a very it's a tough process. So, yes, we've thought of that. I think there's some wisdom in having somebody from the outside sometimes because they just come in with a fresh set of eyes and they know the processes and they teach the processes without any preconceived ideas about us and our district. So, but yes, we've thought about that.
Any other questions? Pat? I'm good. Okay. Thank you very much. Terry, I'll call for the vote.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yeah.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move to 5.6. And I believe Mrs. Desire is going to
Yes.
present.
Yes. So, Madam President, members of the board, I'm recommending that the board approve the issuance of a purchase order for financial services consulting through the professional group Public Consulting Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $49,000. As all of you are aware, Missy Wood, our former Director of Business Services, retired on January 4th, and we have appointed Mr. Michael Murray to start as of February 1st. Although Mr. Murray has business experience and has taken several accounting and budgeting courses through the Arizona Association of School Business Officials, there will be a learning curve for him to become familiar with completing and submitting our revised 16-17 budget and our proposed 17-18 budget. So we want to be able to meet those deadlines and have him have the opportunity to ask for assistance should he need it. And so we have received a quote from the professional group consulting. This group is well respected. They've worked with several districts in rural Arizona as well as major districts in the Tucson and Phoenix area. And they are currently covered by the Mojave contract, so the bidding process has taken place.
Do I have a motion to approve the issuance of a purchase order for financial services consulting through the professional group Public Consulting, Inc. at an amount not to exceed $49,000?
I move we approve 5.6 as written.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? No questions? I'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Okay, action item 5.7. Mrs. Desire will also present that.
5.7, we are recommending, Madam President, that the board approve the revised resolutions that were previously approved for the 16-17 school year due to the retirement of Ms. Lynn Wood and the hiring of Michael Murray in this position of Director of Business Services. These resolutions would allow him to conduct the business of the district and be the signing agent. In each of the resolutions, his name has been inserted and is underlined, and these will be valid for the 16-17 school year. We'll have a new set that will come forward for the future. As we did go through, there was a question in relation to the food services fund, $45. I do want to clarify that that is for the cash register at the teacher serving time, because the students do not use cash. They use their prepaid accounts. And then finally, on the final resolution, we have added, as the board approved at a previous meeting, the remaining directors to be signers in the event that we do need a signer. And again, this is only through the end of the 16-17 school year.
Do I have a motion to approve the revised resolutions for fiscal year 2016-17, allowing Mr. Murray to sign checks, legal documents, and agreements on behalf of Lake Havasu Unified School District?
I so move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second
Is there any questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote, Karen.
John Maston,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
Ellen Ward,
it. Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes. Action item 5.8. compensation packages.
Mrs. Desire, yes. With your permission, Madam President and board members, I would like to do a presentation prior to presenting this agenda item. Summarize the work that the Budget Committee did in making the recommendation.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize to the audience because it's going to be on the screen behind you. We are working on that.
It's a work in progress. Give you some extra stuff.
Brady.
The front is the new back.
As all of you are aware, we did form a budget committee once our community passed our school board, our school bond and override initiatives. And this particular committee was looking at the recommendations for the expenditures of the override, which was approved at approximately $3.9 million. So what I'm going to do is give you the information that we shared with the Budget Committee and then also come forward with our final recommendation of the pieces that we're asking the board to approve in the compensation package. So one of the things that we talked about was the community commitment in the passing of the override. Is this working? Yes? No? No.
You're just fine.
I can hear you. You can hear me. Will I speak louder if I don't hold it?
Use it as a prop.
Pretty soon I'll be talking into the And so we had several priorities. One of those was to address the insurance benefit. Another area was to address salary, and that included the base pay. We certainly wanted to be above Parker at $33,000, and longevity for our staff who have been committed to us through the hard times and stayed with us. We also looked at decreasing athletic fees as one of the community commitments. And then as a group, we talked about the fact that we must demonstrate fiscal responsibility in the process of implementing this funding plan. And we need to plan for sustainability because we do know that an override is only fully funded for 5 years and then decreases in the last 2 years. And so without it being continuously renewed, ongoing expenditures are not often sustainable. Excuse me. One of the areas that we wanted to look at also was what was the historical perspective. And so in looking at from the time of the recession, oh, thank you. You're I'm going to be wrong. So beginning with the recession in 2007, and since that time, we did honor all horizontal steps for education. So anybody who had increased their salary by earning credits for education was honored with 1 year exception when those were frozen. And then those were given the following year. In 2007-08, that was the last year that we gave a vertical step to classified. There was a vertical step built in prior to that. And then in 2008-09, that was the last time that a step was given to certificated staff. And they were frozen after that. So from 2009 through 2011, all staff were frozen in their salary for that period of time. Then in 11-12, we did have some additional money that we were able to give a one-time $1,500 amount to teachers. So that was a supplemental pay. It was not ongoing, $1,500. And then from 12 through 14, again, everyone was frozen. In 14-15, the board approved an ongoing COLA to the base salaries. And those were identified based on years of service. So it was a way of providing some money as well as appreciating those folks who had been here through that time of frozen salaries. And so you can see the breakdown of what was given to those individuals who were in those positions at that time, and that was ongoing by person. Then in 15-16, the board approved a 3.5% ongoing salary increase for all employees, and also approved a raise of the base pay to help attract teachers to our district. The other area that the district had been committed to was paying for employee benefits, and so employee benefit costs were covered. And for the 16-17 school year, The medical benefits that are being contributed are $7,518 per employee per year. We also contribute fixed costs, which are the district paid portion of the things like unemployment insurance, Social Security, retirement, Medicare, et cetera. We refer to those as fixed costs, and those equal approximately 20% of an employee's salary that we're paying on top of that to match those things. And then those employees themselves are also paying for a portion of that out of their salary. We also have a compensation chart that shows the history of our Proposition 301 payments, and there are dollars that are funded for qualified certificated staff. So not every single certificated staff, but those who are qualified. And this shows the history, and you can see that it fluctuates based on the economy. But for the 15-16 school year, our certificated employees who qualified received approximately $6,000 of pay on top of their regular salary. One of the issues that we've been talking about as a district, and this is an important piece to understand, is our enrollment trends. And we are starting to look like a declining enrollment district. We've been categorized as a declining enrollment district for this year by the state, but looking at our ongoing trends, and I realize this is a little difficult to see, but we look at our numbers over here, and we can see that in kindergarten we have about 350 students, 400 in first grade, 380 in second, and down the road. All of our numbers, except for this one number here in first grade, are under 400 students. Currently, at the 7th grade and 8th grade, we have approximately 473 and 458, so these are much larger classes. And then looking at the high school, again, these classes are all in the 400s. Interestingly, 2 smaller classes, but 10th grade and the graduating 458 is going to be replaced by a class that's about 458. So it looks like the high school will be fairly constant in size next year. But unfortunately, as these classes come through the grade levels, they are not getting bigger, they're getting smaller. So ultimately, when the high school has 4 classes of students that are under 400, we talk about that declining enrollment for the district as well. One of the areas that came up was, well, what about in our community? We have a lot of students who attend kinder and then in private setting and then come to first grade. And then we have many students who join us at the middle school or at the high school level. So we went back and looked at the historical trends. And over the last, since 2013, we've gained approximately 10 students on average from 6th to 7th grade. So those are the numbers of students who come from outside the community schools into our public schools. And then at 9th grade, we've gained on average about 30 students. And that's over the course of those years. Now, we did have an unusual year this year. We actually gained 73 students in the middle school. And so we actually had a smaller class at 6th grade last year. And we went up by 73 students because of the number that we gained from outside. Thank you. I think it's nerves, I really do. And so we would have a much smaller class in 7th grade this year had it not been for that unusual gain of 73 students. And at the high school we gained 24 students this year, so that fit in with that average of approximately 30. So we do know in terms of our trend data, unless our community grows, the number of students that we have coming up through our ranks are not as large of classes as they have been in the past. The other area that we have to think about, so we have declining enrollment, and then the other area, which I know legislatively they're looking at, is current year funding. And what current year funding means is that we would be funded on a monthly basis based on our enrollment instead of based on the previous year's 100th day. The reason that this is important in this particular chart is looking at, starting back in the 08-09 school year, I'm just going to come across to the totals. We started the year with a certain number of students. We ended the year minus 236 students. And so if we were being funded, that would mean that we were getting less money every time we lost students, but we still have the same commitments financially each month. So when we look at, that was the largest year. When we look at our trend, actually it's not, 10-11 was the largest year. But when you look at our trend, we're always over 100 students that we lose throughout the year. And so when you think about 100 students times our daily rate, that's quite a bit of money to have
to plan to lose during the school year. So as we look at the planning for our budget, we have to take that in mind that our daily attendance is declining slightly, and we have some uncertainty because of our numbers with real-time funding. But we have some good things that are happening. We are expecting that we'll have some increased cost in our ADM that we get from student from the state. We understand that we'll have an increase slightly from the 123, and that the governor and the legislature are calculating a COLA for next year. And so we hope that we'll get a little bit of an increase there. But we also know, as time goes by, that fixed costs, benefit costs, and utility costs increase. So down the long term, we have to balance for all of that. The other area that was not in the original planning was the passage of Prop 206, which is the minimum wage law. And I'm not making a value judgment about that. However, it has implications for us in terms of our funding. So as of January 1st, 2017, we were required to bring all of our employees up to a minimum wage of $10 an hour. And so we did have several employees that were below $10 an hour. And what I want to point out here, because it's important to a later slide, is that the cost of bringing our lowest employee up to $10 was around $2,000. Is how much it cost us to do that. We have a commitment by law that we have to raise it by 50 cents an hour by January of 18, another 50 cents an hour by January of 19, to the minimum wage becomes $12 an hour effective January of 2020. So that would be the minimum wage for all employees who were hired. So if we were to increase our minimum wage employees who we brought up to $10 an hour by these amounts, this is what it would cost us if we only address those employees. However, what that does is it brings their wage up, but not the wage of other people who are doing sometimes more detailed or highly skilled work. And so in estimating the amount for the override, what we looked at was what would it be if we increased every employee by that amount of money, as opposed to just the minimum wage, so that we're stair-stepping everyone and not creating what is called inversion in the schedule. And so the minimum amount that we would commit to on Prop 206 would be this amount ongoing. The maximum amount, if we did that for every employee that we currently have, would be $908,000. And this does include the fixed cost. So this is the cost to the district. So another area that we looked at was what does it cost to give 1%? And we calculated that for 17-18. This is the year we had the actual data. And to give a 1% to certificated based on this year's salaries was $122,000. To give a 1% to classified was $74,000. And then, of course, that goes up because 1% goes up based on the increases. In order to do this, we had to calculate our revenue control limit. And so we did an estimated budget and identified our revenue control limit for 17-18, which was presented in total to the budget committee. And we talked about the fact that we do know that we have declining enrollment. We estimate approximately 75 ADM drop. We're not sure what our teacher experience index is going to be for this year, so we didn't include the additional funds that we get for having a high teacher experience index. And then we talked about the fact that not knowing these things, we have to be really careful about ongoing cost increases. The other area is that the override dollars, the amount that we're actually going to get each year in taxes, is based on our revenue control limit. And so if our revenue control limit goes down, then the amount of override dollars that we can collect goes down. So we have to compensate for that. It's not always going to be $3.9 million. And then, of course, I mentioned we have only 5 years of full funding. So after spending 3 meetings with the budget committee and looking at all the different suggestions that came up as well as the discussion, the committee suggested that we look at only a 1 to 2 year plan because there are a lot of unknowns going into the future. Particularly in the area of health benefits, we're not certain what's going to happen in the healthcare industry and what the costs will be. And so we do know, at least for the next year or two, that they're probably going to be fairly similar to what they are now, but for the future it would be difficult. And so we talked about considering a 1 to 2 year plan and then continuing our budget committee and adding, kind of making that like an evergreen plan. So each year we reconvene and we do the following year out so that we can have an ongoing plan based on the information that we have. And then our recommendation also is looking at some staff input that asked us to consider the inversion and compression in the salary schedule. And so those two things are an issue. And I said inversion, I meant compression earlier when I talked about adding the 50 cents an hour only to some employees and not other. What it does is it compresses the schedule. What happens with inversion, if you think back to all those years that our teachers were frozen, so what happened was that, and the same thing was true with classified, that we hired employees who had experience that actually came in at a higher salary than someone who had been in the district with the same years of experience because they had been frozen for 5 years. And so while they were still at, let's say if a person was a first-year teacher, they were still at the level of first-year teacher, we hired someone else who came in with 5 years experience and we put them at 5 years experience. This new person to Havasu was making more than a teacher who had been with us for 5 years. And so we found that there was some of that in our schedule as well. We also took the advice from the committee that we really need to look at a salary study with districts that are like ours to see where we are falling in comparison. Obviously, we were paying less than any of the surrounding districts, including Parker, for new teachers, and we have had some issue in recruiting both high-quality certificated and classified candidates, and so it would behoove us to look at the salaries in the like districts. And then the last area that we looked at was considering the equity implications for staff to have a longer work year. So we were trying to be sensitive to in what areas are we equal, what areas are we equitable as we make a recommendation. So the proposal that I'm going to share with you has 3 parts. It addresses base salary, benefits, and longevity. The first part of this is an ongoing addition to the base salary. And as you recall, I mentioned that to bring our lowest classified employee was up about $2,000 to bring that person up. So that person has gotten a $2,000 raise to the base already, as have others, have similar amounts. And so what our recommendation initially was that every employee get $2,000, and that would be recalculating the base. One of the suggestions that came out was that this works out to, for 200-day employees or 187-day employees, as a little bit less than or equal to $10 a day. Some are a little slightly over. And so if we were looking at that as a benchmark and looking at the number of days categories, then what could we do that would make that more equitable in terms of the longer work year? And so this was the solution that we came up with. And that actually is a difference from our original recommendation of about $124,000. Now, for those of you who are doing the math, which I would be doing right now, 225 days at $10 is $2,500. 261 days isn't $3,000. One of the reasons that we did that is that one of the issues we addressed, which is toward the end of the PowerPoint slide, is that we have a real problem with our administrative salaries. And since most of our administrators work 261 days, this was our recommendation to help close that gap for our administrators. And the others that work 261 days are typically more of our higher level employees. Then the next piece was a recommendation that we increase the contribution to the Employee Benefit Trust by 5%, and that's the per employee contribution. So that is anticipated to cover any increase in benefit costs, so that those costs would not have to be passed on to the employees. And then the other area was the dependent coverage. Our original proposal was to have our employees begin to assume the cost of dependent coverage that was picked up by the district last year. So my understanding is there was a large increase in the dependent cost coverage, and so the board chose to take the lump Prop 123 funds to cover that cost for our employees, so they did not get an increase to their deductions for dependent costs, because that would have taken a huge amount of their salaries. And so in order to cover the cost of dependents, it's $465,000. What we talked about is giving our employees with dependents the opportunity to plan for that increase in their contributions over time. And so the recommendation is that we continue to cover the difference that the district picked up for one more year, and then have begin the implementation of dependent coverage costs at 10% in 18-19. So what that looks like is that in 16-17, employees had paid 0% of that increase. In 17-18 it would be 0%, in 18-19 it would be 10%, which as a total amount, the employees are paying about $46,500. And so that's what that looks like if we were to take this out through 24-25. But again, this is a decision that's a recommendation for next year only, with a suggestion for 18-19 to consider. So looking at what we have so far, we have our 523 employees times 2,000 plus. There's a little bit of a difference in there with that graduated scale at this amount with the fixed cost, which is the $1.379 million. The 5% increase per employee is $216,000. The dependent coverage, oops, go back again, is $465,000, which brings our ongoing cost for this particular proposal to $2 million. Then we went back and looked at, and I really appreciate our HR department spending hours on this, is looking at all of our employees, this is both certificated and classified, who, if they quit and got hired back with the experience that they've gained, what would they actually be making if we had hired somebody who had their experience? And so that is the inversion factor. And what we actually discovered is that in order to correct the inversion issues for those employees, it would cost us about $100,000. And so our recommendation is that we do correct those employees. And the range of correction is pretty broad there. Then looking at contributing $200,000 to the athletics so that we could reduce the fees. We're looking at a recommendation for a longevity supplement, salary supplement, and then making a one-time contribution to the EBT reserve in order to help strengthen the EBT reserve so that we don't have to get into a situation like happened last year where suddenly we have to pass on huge costs to the employees. Now the longevity, in order to be able to calculate it, we're basing it on the previous year's salary. So the longevity award would be for the 17-18 school year, but it's based on the 16-17 salary. So our suggestion for a one-time supplemental pay, and again, thinking back to all of those years that people were frozen, and if they had had COLA over those years, what that might look like. So our suggestion is that for those staff who have been here 20 years or more, again, the percentages you can see on the side here. So you'll notice that there is a graduation, 15 to 19, 10 to 14, and 5 to 9. And then looking at years 1 through 4, and this is a question that has come up, we are recommending a slight payment here for those who have been here for this time. And part of that came from the discussion that we were able to hear from other districts about the offering of signing bonuses. And so as opposed to trying to offer a signing bonus, it made more sense to say, you've been with us for a year, we'll give you 1%. If you stay another year, you'll get a little bit more, etc. So in this particular recommendation, the ongoing costs are $2 million plus the $100,000 for inversion. And then the one-time costs, which means this is a one-time longevity bonus for 17-18, and the athletics, and then the EBT contribution, brings us to the overall amount of $3.96 million as a compensation package. And that is the recommendation that we're bringing to the board tonight. This does commit us to $2.1 million of ongoing dollars that, should we not even add any more, we would have to find that once the override is effective. The rest of our recommendation is important to thinking of it as a 2-year plan, is to conduct a salary schedule in the fall of 2017. And so we're looking at, for all of our groups, certificated, classified, and administrative, using a comparison to like-sized demographic and geographic conditions, looking at entry rate, midpoint, and maximum rate that we pay, maximum hours per day, number of contract days, whether their employees are exempt, non-exempt, and other pay elements. For example, how we do 301 compared to other stipends, hard to fill positions, classifications like, we have counselors that are a little bit different, psychologists, et cetera. And so looking at all of these categories to conduct a salary study. And then for the 17-18 winter, bring our budget committee back together and consider the implications of the salary study for 18-19. So in thinking about 18-19, as an example, we have down that we would add 50 cents an hour for all classified employees, possibly. But it could be that the salary study, we find that some of the employees, in order to be aligned with salaries, might get 35 cents and others might get 75 cents based on what we learned from the salary study. Or it may be that we decide that that's not the case, but that would be an area of discussion. Then our suggestion is that based on the dollars that are available, that we would prioritize as a budget committee the adjustments for 18-19 and bring those back to the board as the recommendation for 18-19's budget salary override implementation. So in the spring, this is continuing what I was just talking about, and then analyzing the impact of the raises that we already have scheduled or suggested for 18-19 to see how those will adjust based on the salary study, and then also to create a plan then for 19-20 so that we always have that 1 year out to bring forward. So then the suggestion for 18-19 is that we do a revised one-time supplemental pay, and this is again for incremented for our 5 through 20 year, and then 1 to 4 is the 1% here. And what this does is it reduces the amount for longevity. We're getting back, if we charge the 10% for dependent coverage in 18-19, another 46.5, this would give us $200,000 to also add to the schedule to work with the salary study. The other thing that we're recommending for 18-19 is that we provide a 3% certificated salary increase, and we allocate that $227,000 ongoing for the 50 cents an hour for all classified employees. So if you remember back to the chart where we figured out the cost of 1%, the amount to give 3%, the amount to give the 50 cents an hour for classified is approximately 3%, which is how we came up with the 3% for certificated. So this commits us in 18-19 to $3.9 million that we would spend. And now it takes our ongoing up to $2.9 million that would have ultimately would need to come out of our maintenance and operation budget if we do not have an override in the future. And then, of course, the considerations. At that point, we should have more data. So the considerations, as we're looking at 18-19, 19-20, is the results of our study, what is actually happening with the insurance program, if we know anything, what are our enrollment trends, and is current year funding actually causing us the concerns that we thought it was going to? What about our state budget trends? We're starting to see more talk about funding for education, so we may be having some increases in funding to education. And then, of course, what are the actual tax dollars that we collect via the override will be important to know. And then we're also looking at staffing formulas. One of the areas that we need to spend some time with is making sure that we're appropriately staffing our schools. It could be that we're overstaffed, and it could be that we're understaffed. We don't know that until we look at our ratios and look at some comparison districts. But we do believe that looking at the staffing and looking at it more formulaically, if that's a word, might have an impact on the budget. The reason that this came up was some data that was brought forward in that in the year 2002, we had 5,900 students, and we had a total staff of 503. Then in 2015, there were 552 staff with 5,300 students. And so what were the differences, and why were there so many differences? So we pulled up just where we were for 2016. We have 513 staff currently, 245 certificated, 16 certified, or excuse me, administrative. That's me. Whoops. And then our classified is a little higher than 2002, but smaller here at 252. So we're actually 10 over where we were in 2002, with about 800 less students, a little less than that. There are some reasons that that happens, and those would include the number of students who require special services, the number of students who are utilizing transportation. Those are some of the things that could affect it. The increase in grant-funded positions and so forth. So we need to break this down a little bit more, but that's part of the reason we feel like we need to do a staffing ratio study. So thinking out into the future, as we have the commitment for the Prop 206, we know that this is the maximum amount. If we want to be equal, we need to provide something equal for certificated, depending on how we plan this out. But if we were to play this out and just doing these smaller amounts, when we get to the, we'll go through here, just playing it forward, when we get to the 2023 school year, this is where the override is reduced by 1/3. So in order to do just this minimal amount, we would have to take that year $1.1 million out of the M&O budget in order to maintain it. And then the following year, which it goes down 2/3, because we have a little bit more coming out of dependent coverage, we have $1.5 million. And then without having another override, we would need to make sure we had $3.3 million more than what we have now freed up to sustain those salaries. And so that's why it's really important that we look at the big picture as well as the short-term picture when we make our commitments to the budget. And then I mentioned earlier the retention and recruitment of administrators. One of the areas that we talk about is the fact that in our surrounding districts, they do offer things like full family benefits, but we also currently have 39 certificated staff. I have teachers on there, but certificated staff who make more than an elementary principal with 5 years of experience. And so we do need to do something to address those salaries, which was partly that piece, at least on the 3,000 for the 261 employees. That does bring them up just a little bit. We really wanted to limit our ongoing cost to $2 million because we think we could find that in the budget in the future, that we'll get it. Right now, we're not there. We also want to honor all of the promises that were made to our employees in our community. We tried to make it as equitable as possible for all employees. There's no such thing as equal in a perfect world. And we need to be reasonable about our override estimates. And so basically, what we communicated was that we want to continue to look for ways to reduce the M&O budget, to find efficiencies so that we have sustainability. And we want to also make sure that we communicate our gratefulness to the community, that the areas that they asked us to focus on, that we are trying to do that in the best interest of all of our employees.
Thank you.
I have a question. The money would be available, what, in the fall? The first money for this would be in the fall this year?
First money for the override.
Okay, from the override, yes.
Okay, so we are recommending that the board approve the compensation package, and now that you have some of the background behind that, basically this would be allowing us to retain our excellent staff, recruit some of the best candidates for our vacancy, and to help uphold our community commitment. So what we're looking for, as delineated in the backup here that you just saw, is an increase in base pay for all employees, a longevity supplement for all employees based on years of service, and a commitment to conduct a comprehensive salary study. In the area of benefits, a 5% increase to the premium contribution per employee, and a contribution to the EBT reserve for future stability, and the commitment to cover the difference in the dependent premium increase that occurred in the 15-16 year for the 17-18 school year. And then finally, for athletic fees, to allocate $200,000 to the amounts that would be paid to coaches, which would allow us to reduce our athletic fees from $800 to $400 at the high school and from $400 to $200 at the middle school. In addition, we have additional compensation, which includes classroom site Prop 301 funds. And so we are recommending that we continue to fund those classroom site funds per legal guidelines and continue to fund them by a separate check or deposit on 3 dates established during this fiscal year. There's some information on the fund amounts that are listed in the backup documentation. And I know that if you would like more clarification on those funds, Mr. Murray is prepared to present that. And then finally, that the specific employee benefit insurance information would be presented at a future board meeting because we do not have that available at this board meeting. But our plan is that in our letters to teachers that they will have broken down exactly what their compensation will be for next year based on the recommendation.
Do I have a motion to approve the compensation packages for the fiscal year 2017-18 as presented?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Questions?
I want to hear what they have to say.
I'd like clarification on longevity supplemental pay for the number of years that you're with the district. Does that matter which position you were with the district?
No, it's just your hire date. The most recent hire date. Most recent hire date, yes.
Okay, this goes off of me. So when I started with the district, I was a sub, what, 2 months, 3 months, I don't know, decent, right in there. And then I went on as a classified sub for special ed for an 8. Then I was permanent. Then I said, okay, I decided to go back and get a teaching certificate. I took off 6 months for a leave of absence to do my student teaching at the high school, and then came back as certified. So where would those years of service qualify? That's what Ms. Gibb was referring to.
I'd have to go back and look at your.
But would it count those whole
match.
things, or would it count parts of it?
I'd have to go back and find out whether they actually granted you a leave of absence. I'd have to go back and look at your individual shoot match. So part of this, and the reason that we say it's the most recent start date, is there are employees who left the district and then came back after years, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, however many years. So we're looking at the most recent start date. The intent of the longevity is to reward those people who stuck it out in the district for those years of frozen salaries, et cetera.
I appreciate you guys looking at the inversion factor because it is frustrating when your years working for a district aren't valued as much as years working for Parker, is how it felt. So I do appreciate that being addressed.
And if I could share, I mean, those suggestions came from the budget committee. They weren't our ideas. They were all the things that were brought up of things that we didn't necessarily realize.
Can you share what that budget committee looked like?
Yes, the budget committee was representatives from each of the schools in the district, at least one certificated and one classified employee, as well as the principal. And the high school had an additional representation as well because of their size. And then each of the departments in the district had representation as well. And then the administrative team, and then we also had 2 board members as representatives on that committee.
I want to thank you for taking into consideration longevity. It does mean a lot.
And this in no way compensates people for what they were frozen for, but it helps.
I have a question about current enrollment. When does that funding go into effect for current enrollment?
So we actually had a grace year this year, and it will go into effect next year for the 17-18 school year, barring any legislation that would change that.
And so the funding that we will get from the state will vary, what, from month to month, or as our enrollment changes? How will that work?
We haven't gotten a good answer on that. The last thing that I heard was that it would vary from month to month, but then I think people have been talking. Mike, you might have heard something different from that.
I've heard month to month more often than I've heard other things. So it depends on who you ask at this point. So we're still trying to get a definite answer as to how to budget going forward based on the information they provide.
I think the charter schools are paid on a month-to-month basis, and that's the model they're looking at. So I'm assuming,
that's what
as I'm reading, that it's a month-to-month basis. That's what we anticipate.
So this would start in July?
Yes.
And what will the 0 point be the 100th day of this year, or will, I mean, there will be no enrollment in July, so how will you get funded?
You're supposed to forecast out into January of 2018 and predict basically what your enrollment numbers should look like at that point.
And when do you have to make that prediction?
Before the budget is...
Right, that prediction has to be made before we submit the budget so that we can build a budget based on that.
And when is that?
It has to be submitted by July 15th. Yeah, there is some talk about assisting declining districts. I just got a legislative update today. There's even, and you might even hear of it too, but there's some talk also about delaying it again and just going back to prior year funding. So that hasn't really moved anywhere yet, but it's been proposed. But there's really been no legislative movement yet of taking it anywhere. But it's there. It's showing that somebody is proposing that yet again.
I talked to Regina Cobb, our District 5 representative, one of them, and she said that will not happen. She said it's a done deal. The current enrollment is set in stone. Of course, she's just one person. But
I did a survey of the Mojave and La Paz County superintendents. I just finished collating all of that data today, actually, in order to inform, hopefully, our legislators' votes on current year funding for the future. In our 2 counties, there was only one district that said they benefited from current year funding, and that district has 118 students in it.
Wow.
You did that study on the request of one of our legislators.
I did, and I have it. In fact, I was going to ask you for that email address so I could send it.
I got phone number.
I do know that you had a budget committee, but it is my impression that taking all of the factors that they brought up, that you are the one who got this all figured out. Am I correct?
Well, actually, our director's team and I did that, yes. We brought back, and then the other piece, though, the principals went back and presented it to their full sites, the committees did, so there was more of a reciprocal process.
Okay. Well, you should all be commended.
Thank you.
Because this has always been a torturous experience every year, and somehow or other you did it. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would call this plan Frankenstein's monster. There's a little bit of this plan, a little bit of that plan, a little bit of this plan over here. There's an idea over here that was grabbed. And, I had the pleasure to watch it be put together, and I can tell you the amount of work that came out of the district office was wow. You would ask for something, and the next time that you would see that person, it would be ready and done and well thought through. You guys have great ideas, by the way. This is the community's district, and you're part of the community, and what we saw in pay proposals and ideas was well thought out. It doesn't mean that the whole thing fit into the puzzle, but what I saw there, I was very impressed with as well.
Who were the 2 board members?
John and I.
Well, congratulations to the 2 of you.
And to answer your question, Dawn, when I walked out of the last meeting, I said to our group of LHCA board executives that was the closest thing to meet and confer that we've had in a long time. Even though we don't have meet and confer anymore, I thought it was as close as it could get, and that was very much appreciated.
I think we all need to keep in mind also that with the funding changes, with everything that's going on at the state level, this could be ugly next year too. I mean, we need to understand that. It's going to be hard work each year. And we just have to fight our way through it.
Do you happen to have the funds, Mr. Murray, for that we paid out for Fund 11, 12, and 13?
I do. Do you want it per employee?
Sure. That's Great.
Total for Fund 11 was just under $1,400 per employee.
Okay.
Fund 12, 28, just under $2,900 per employee. And Fund 13, right there under $1,800, $1,783.
So when I was looking at the presentation, I just want to make sure that when we are looking at the considerations for 2018 through 21, that we're building in the loss of 301. I mean, I know that they're probably going to go back out and try to pass something else, but it expires and we're going to lose that funding as it stands. So I think the sooner we start
That's another piece.
keeping that out there, the better, so that our legislators hear that too.
Well, and that's part of, and doing the salary study, an important piece of it, because there are some districts that salaries are the 301 is built into their salary, so it looks like they're getting paid more, and those districts are going to take a cut if that in fact doesn't go through.
When you look into the cut of 301, to consider the amount of insurance you're taking out of it, because that will have to be made somewhere.
Yeah, like $1,250 per employee that was going.
Correct.
Back to
And
supplement that as
on
well.
the screenshot that I showed you on that, it was taken out already. It doesn't show that. So that's what you get in addition to the insurance.
I just mean that M&O will have to pick that up.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes, okay. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? We'll go ahead and call for the question.
Pat Brady?
Yes.
Alan Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. All right, action item 5.9. Mrs. Asire?
Yes. We're recommending that the board approve the first presentation of revisions in the PE policies for school board meetings, which would be BEBD and BEDBE and BEDD. So the first one is the correction on the regular meetings for the third Tuesday of the month, which we actually have been doing. The second one is to remove the agenda order that's currently in the policy and replace that as an exhibit. And that exhibit is the next one. And we're looking at changing the order of our agendas for future meetings. The major changes would be that the call to the public would come prior to recognition, that vouchers and student activity funds would become part of the new business action items, that there would be a call to the public at the end of the meeting for those who wish to speak at the end, and that there would be an opportunity for the board members to suggest items for future agendas. And then finally, on the next one, the BEDD, the change here is that the board would generally follow the Roberts Rules of Order.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the first presentation of revised policies BE, BEDB, BEDBE, and BEDD?
I'll make a motion, we approve all of it.
In a second.
I'll second it.
Any questions or comments? Go ahead and call for the question.
Alan Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. Okay, action item 5.10, and Mrs. Walter will present that.
Madam President and members of the board, it is recommended that the board approve the purchase of contracted occupational therapy services with therapy and staffing for the 2017-18 school year, not to exceed $91,200. The district has taken action to recruit qualified therapy-related services staff and has not been able to fill these positions. We are requesting approval of contract for occupational therapy services for the 17-18 school year with therapy and staffing at a rate not to exceed $65 an hour. Therapy and staffing is one of the providers that were approved on the 16-17 school year by the governing board as part of their 16-17 related service RFP process. We would like to exercise our option to extend the award for the second year at the same rate. This is a requirement to ensure the provision of services for eligible students to receive a free appropriate public education for students requiring related services as required under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Funds from the M&O budget will be used to pay for the services and has been reviewed by purchasing. Just want to let you know this year we had to contract out for teletherapy, and we're hopeful that this person is going to replace that one position, so we'll have an on-site therapist, and our goal is to have 2 on-site, and we're working very diligently to procure that second on-site person this time.
Do I have a motion to approve the purchase of contracted occupational therapy services with therapy as staffing for 2017-18?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any questions or discussion?
What occupational therapist at Smoke Creek or district-wide?
It's district-wide. There's multiple sites that the therapists tend to share at this time. We have the 2. There generally is Smoke Tree along with the preschool and our homebound services, and one other site, Jamaica, that we've had distributed based on caseloads, and then the other has covered all the other schools. So we look at that caseload based on your needs, but at this time that is what we're looking at.
Any other questions? Call for the vote.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Masden?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Ellen Ward?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. Okay, action item 5.11, approval of vouchers. Mr. Murray?
Madam President, members of the board, it's my recommendation that you approve the vouchers for December 2016, student activity funds and student activity funds both K-8 and 9 through 12, and auxiliary funds for December 2016.
I'd make a motion to that effect.
I'll second it.
Any discussion or questions?
I just wanted to mention the fact that I had mentioned some questions to you earlier. And that was simply because in the future you might expect me to ask you to clarify some things. These are fine, no problem. But I just want to make a point.
Thank you.
These are from December, correct?
Correct.
And I'll reiterate my question from the work session. Is it your intent now to get these to be a month drag as opposed to a 2-month drag?
After that work session, I did follow up with that, and yes, we typically would, if this is February, we would be reviewing January's, correct.
Okay.
So next month we could do January and February, if you would like, in March.
Absolutely. Let's get caught up.
Okay.
Good idea.
We can do
I was going to mention something for you.
No, go ahead.
I did want to mention, as we were looking at the activity, student activity funds, that Mrs. Cohen had asked a question about what some of the acronyms were for the clubs. Mr. Becker has assured me that in next year's handbook that they will be spelled out so that our parents and our kids know that as well. So this is what the handbook looks like.
A little bit of alphabet soup, huh? Are we doing any further in that thought process on consolidating any of these, Mike?
I was going to actually talk to you about the drafting, like you mentioned that last week. That is the engineering class, and we did have conversation about some of these CTE courses here. Purchasing will be meeting with CTE to actually review the titles yet again because they do change periodically, so they're going to be doing that here within the next few weeks.
Makes it a little bit more clear.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead and call for the vote.
John Masden?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Ellen Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. Okay, action item 5.12. Let's see, who's presenting? Mr. Becker?
You want me to bring this back up there, or?
Yes, please.
We've gotten so far.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended the governing board approve a decrease to the Lake Havasu High School athletics participation fee to $400 annual athletics fee per athlete, effective with the 2017-18 school year. There will be no additional fee for playing additional sports. So it's per season. If you play multiple sports, if you're a 2-sport or a 3-sport athlete, it is that $400.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the decrease in Lake Havasu?
I make that motion.
I second that motion.
Any discussion, comments, questions?
You know, we kind of and my thought process says I'd like to see a participation fee, period. So whether you're participating in sports or band or some type of other direct school sponsored activity like Skills USA or FBLA group or whatever, that you pay a participation fee, and that's a universal fee to be involved in a school sponsored item. How do we get there?
To that point,
Yes.
of charging everybody, as you initially say that, my wheels start immediately working. As long as we do not set a participation fee that would use an entire tax credit, it would help us build our tax credit base. If you were having kids going out and getting a $400 tax credit, and say we were charging kids $100, well, now we're building that tax credit base to be able to put towards other things for our kids. But taking on an animal of that size would be very much like the budget committee and getting all the stakeholders at the table and say, how do we do this, what's fair, and gathering ideas from everybody rather than just coming from a small group of, say, administrators at the high school.
There's kind of a dichotomy in town where you get to a point in looking at this where you have younger parents and people working in Havasu that make obviously lower wages in comparison to other places in the state. And I don't look at this as a question of fairness. I look at this as a question of a well-rounded overall education. And how do we get children participating in these things in a universal way? How do we encourage that participation? And I think that if you have a prohibitive level fee, whether it be sports or band or the competition clubs that you have on campus, those types of things, I think that you lose a piece of that participation, because that fee, even with a tax credit attached to it, can still be daunting to some families. So just a thought process that I think we should probably start, and just a recommendation.
I think Mr. Madsen's right. There are some of us would like to see this at zero, and we're not going to get there this year. But this is a great start. The thing is, we've got 4 years, and we should expect to see improvement each year, bringing this down to a level that's reasonable. I've never seen a sports fee or a participation fee at this level. So, I mean, I know we can get it down. We just have to work at it.
I do want to remind us that this happened when the state reduced funding to public education. And that's when the crisis came. And I would love your creative ideas about how to do this. But this seems to me the state needs to do its part and fund schools appropriately. That would be the solution.
Mr. Becker, can you share the majority of the cost that the fees go to?
The majority of the costs that the fees go to are, and we recently just changed where we play a majority of our games. We were playing, when I was coaching less than 5 years ago, we were playing a majority of our games in the Yuma area. it's 30 minutes closer. Well, 30 minutes doesn't seem like a whole lot until you do it for an entire school year with every team that leaves our campus, and the cost of fuel, the wear and tear on a bus. So when you take that 30 minutes, you can roughly say that's 30 miles per trip, times how many trips that a bus is leaving the high school. During football season, there's a bus leaving twice a week. If varsity plays at home, the other two are on the road. And then that's not counting volleyball at that same time. It's not counting cross country. So when you look at it in that aspect, that's a lot of miles saved. We've since moved to the Phoenix area. Now we've put that 30 miles back out and we're traveling further. So that's something that's coming into play. So transportation is one of the big costs. And then the coaches' stipends for those individuals to coach those teams. On the budget committee, you saw there where there were 39 teachers making more than a principal at an elementary school that has 5 years experience. I was fortunate enough to get to coach teams here, but also unfortunate enough to punish myself by sitting down and counting out the number of hours a coach puts in and look at their salary and do the per hour, which unfortunately I took the time to do that and was not happy to see that at the end. So those are the two major costs, are really the coaches' stipends and the transportation. Our booster club has stepped up and has started taking on all of the equipment costs. Football helmets have to be reconditioned every year. They have to pass a test, and that is a large cost when you're talking 100+ football players. They fail 10 to 15 of them every single year, which means you have to replace that helmet at a $250 cost times 10 to 15 helmets, so it adds up quickly.
When is the last time the coach's stipend has been increased? 1960?
Wasn't school there.
No. The coach's stipend is based off of the base salary. It's a percentage of the base salary, so the last time that the pay increase, the coach's stipend had to match it. So,
good, I'm glad to hear that.
Which is also a consideration that has to be put into effect now with the new presentation that you all just approved.
There's also no family cap in here on yours.
Correct.
Now, when we get to the next action item, there is.
Correct.
Can you explain why there is no family cap at the high school, but there is at the middle school?
Very much back to what I just spoke on. Pretty much every sport at the high school has 3 coaches. At the middle school, you're looking at 2 coaches. You're looking at increased travel distance. The kids at the middle school do not travel to the Phoenix area. They do not travel to the Yuma area. So when we're looking at that budget for getting a bus down the road and for 3 coaches per sport, that's where that money has to come in. It's unfortunate. I'm to the side where I was lucky enough to go to a school where I did not have to pay for athletics, and I would love to see that.
So was I.
Yes.
And I went here.
Yes.
Any other questions? Go ahead and call, thank you. Go ahead and call for the vote, please.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes, indeed.
Bob Aston,
Yes.
Nicole Collins.
Yes. Okay, action item 5.13. Mrs. Mulligan going to present.
Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended that the governing board approve a change to the Thunderbolt Middle School athletic participation fee effective with the 17-18 school year to the following tiered fees. $100 for track, cross country, and spirit line, $200 for volleyball, football, basketball, baseball, and softball, and as you mentioned, that we will have a $200 cap.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the decrease in the Thunderbolt Middle School athletics tiered participation fee for the 17-18 school year?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion or questions? Go ahead and call for the question. Thank you.
Ellen Ward,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
Tom Aston,
Yes.
Pat Rooney,
Yes.
Nicole Collins.
Yes. Okay, action item 5.14. Mrs. Sire is going to present that. Oh. Oh, no. Actually, we're not.
We did not receive the information that we were supposed to receive to have this item approved by the board, so we are recommending that the board take action to postpone it to the next meeting.
Do you have a motion to postpone this action item?
I would move that we postpone 514 until the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Can't really have discussion unless we have the contract. Call for the vote here.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes.
Ellen Ward?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. Okay, action item 5.15, Mrs. Sire.
Madam President, members of the board, we are recommending that the governing board approve the final contract between Hinesfield Beach and Company and the Lake Havasu School District for our audit services for the 2017-18 school year at the cost of $46,000. We do have a chart of approval. It can be a 5-year approval. We will bring it back. Actually, the governing board approved this in October of 2016. It was required to be sent to the Auditor General's office in order to receive the office's approval of the document. We have received that approval and are requesting final approval for this contract.
I make a motion we accept 515.
Second.
Second.
Any questions?
So we're approving the approval.
Yes.
Okay.
I wasn't sure we needed to, but I wanted to be safe.
Okay. I call for the question.
John Maston?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Ellen Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes. Okay, action item 6.1, informational, and I'll turn that over to Mrs. Asire.
Thank you. We do have a few things to share. We do have our gifts and donations, and every month we do have an opportunity to review those donations. This were for February, I believe. No, this is January. So we're talking approximately $13,600 in donations for that month. Some of that is cash and some of that is services. One made me think about it as, John, you were talking a little bit about the various different clubs and groups and so forth. And how many of our students participate in band? And we had over $2,500 in donations for the band just for their trailer. Think about the expense of if we didn't have donations for those sorts of things. And then the PTA at Starline, $7,000 to redo their stage lighting and so forth. So we do have a community that gives a lot. And then we don't often mention the $100 and $50 donations, and we do appreciate those individuals who are giving what they can because they believe in helping our schools. So wanted to recognize those donations this month. I also wanted to share with the board that we received a call yesterday morning that we were awarded the Master Teacher Grant. And so that was the 3-year grant, $120,000 for sure. I've brought now the numbers. As a part of that, and this is always interesting, we were invited to submit an additional grant request for $50,000 for a grant that's called the NT3 grant, which is the Network to Transform Teaching. And so we were thinking we would put together a proposal and bring that to the board in March for you to review. The grant would complement what we're doing with the Master Teacher Grant and enhance it slightly. It is only a 1-year opportunity. I also wanted to share that we are continuing to utilize the School Facilities Board. I know that you've pointed that out in the vouchers. The open projects currently are the Starline roof. We have an open project at Smoke Tree for the refrigerant monitor. We have several open projects at the high school, which include kitchen hoods, wall leaks, and the chillers. The other schools that are currently closed but have had projects are Havasupai and Thunderbolt, and Oro Grande has a sewer line that's open right now. So most of our schools have something going on as we're trying to maintain our facilities. But I don't see John still here, but John has been very proactive about attending the state board meetings, being there to answer questions, and we continue to receive funding for these emergency situations. And then there was a piece of information. I know that you received the ASBO information, but this came out from Chuck Essex. I'll just pass it to you just so you have it for you. I just reformatted it slightly, but I did send it to Mr. Lewis, who has stepped out. I wanted to share this with you since I did send it to him. One of the things that came up through a reporter's question about the per pupil funding just from the state of Arizona. So this is the state funding. And the question was about fiscal year 2008. And the reason I'm thinking is as we talked about the budget and the instability of state funding, in the fiscal year 2008, the funding per pupil was $4,949. In fiscal year 2017, it's $4,528. So it has actually gone down by $421. And then when you look at the inflation rate, and I don't have the calculation here, but I know that they did calculate that out, which we have not gotten over those years, that reduces that funding to $3,938 per pupil in real dollars today. And so while we talk about the M&O budget, that's the M&O budget is the amount that we receive per pupil, and that's the amount that we have to run our district when we don't have grants and other kinds of funding sources. And so I just thought that was an interesting piece of information that somebody sat down and did, and wanted to share that with you as well. And then finally, I wanted to mention that we have some of our division updates that are in the update this month, and you can see those. But I would like to draw your attention to the personnel monthly update. One of the questions that came up with the override was how are we recruiting and retaining teachers, and what has our past history been? And so what our Director of Personnel, Mrs. Miner, and her staff have put together is where we believe that we are going to be in terms of our openings for this year with intent to return responses, and then the snapshot of the recruiting that we've done and who's still here. So you have some information about that. And my hope is that with our salaries increasing and doing some of the work we're doing with the override, that we will not have that turnover in our recruits over the next few years. So, I think that is all I have to report.
Okay, the last thing is board reports. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share?
Well, I have a comment I need to make. Okay. And after listening to the budget and ability to give our staff significant raises, much more realistic than before, as far as now that we have the override, it's just absolutely mandatory that we all call our representatives for District 5 and tell them not to vote for the vouchers. The vouchers will drain money away from public schools. Just think what it's like if you can say my child is now going to a private school. Think about, if you've read Mark Twain, you know there are scoundrels and scam artists appearing in all of his books, and this opportunity is going to give anyone the opportunity to open up a private school. Now, if you don't care if your taxpayer money goes to religious schools or to private schools, that's one thing. If that's one thing, but think about the effect this is going to have. People who are not teachers can open up private schools right in their own homes and have a small group of students. Little by little, this is going to just have this terrible effect on our system here in Lake Havasu, and I'm extremely concerned about that.
The other part of that is that there's just no accountability. Look where you are tonight. You are at a school board meeting. Look at all of the financial record keeping that has to take place. The board has to vote on spending anything at all and vote on all kinds of other things. The auditors come in during the year. The accountability for taxpayers' dollars is just excellent. There is no accountability for that money, for the vouchers whatsoever. And the only thing that if the school does give a test, it will be shared only with that parent. It will not be compared to another school, to other teachers, as we do in the public school system. This is just absolutely crucial, and I'm so disappointed in Sonny Borelli. I did not realize that he signed on to this bill. Our legislator here from our senator here from Lake Havasu City. I've already called, but I'm going to call again. And then I was thinking today, Mrs. Asire mentioned the latest report from the Arizona School Business Officers Group. And the real money that we're getting from the state is, she said, after inflation is considered, $3,938. That's what we really are getting from the state. It's not even over for almost $5,000. But now with the vouchers, the state is willing to give parents $5,000 to $5,200 more than they are willing to give to the public school system. That is wrong, and we cannot let this happen. So please get people on the phone, whatever you can do. I've never called anyone in my life, but last week I called all three, and you end up talking to an assistant. They expect the calls coming in, and I have heard that they even get 5 calls. They are amazed, and this voucher thing is all over the state. I mean, parents and teachers, school board members, they are making those calls. They're showing up in Phoenix. We cannot, if we're going to pay our teachers, pay our staff, we have to have sustainability. We cannot have declining enrollment. And the vouchers are a sure thing that we will have declining enrollment. You just count on it. And then I would like to say one more thing about another bill, HB 2082, which is the mandatory recess bill. And when I think about that, you know, our legislature hates it when the federal government tells the legislature of the state of Arizona what they have to do. And now we have a bill in the legislature that says that children have to have 50 minutes of recess a day. I think that's great. I think kids ought to have PE every day. I mean, I would love to have an hour of science every day for kids, first through 6th grade. I mean, there would be so many wonderful things. But if you want to be for mandatory recess, that's fine. But it has a provision that recess cannot be used as a punishment. And it is not a punishment. It's an incentive that classroom teachers use to get their kids to do their work. And it's like the night follows the day. You do your work, you get to go to recess. It's not a punishment. It's the way the world works. And now you cannot keep a student in from recess in this particular bill. You cannot keep him from going to recess unless you make a phone call to the parent and get permission to keep him in from recess. It is so unwieldy. It's so ridiculous. I just don't know what else to say about it. I hope I'm getting that point across. But I have not called on that bill yet, but I'm going to certainly call on that one because obviously I don't like it.
Good for you, Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, I just wanted to mention that SB 1156, I'm not sure where it is. I don't know if Carol has an update on that, but I know that that for instructional minutes was working its way to clarify that for us, so hopefully we would have...
I haven't seen that. I do know that as of right now, in the House tonight, passed 56 yeses and 0 noes on HB 2377. And that I talked about with the assessment for Arizona Merit to be on
I wanted to share that we received a call from Chuck Essigs from ASBO last week, also asking for some more detail on the audit that we had, and they were getting ready to go and lobby educators on behalf of that bill as well.
Oh, good.
Educators, legislators. Sorry.
We'll be at the Capitol throughout the month of March.
I had one question. It's not as high level as all this, but could you bring us an update on advertising boards in the high school? And do we have a written policy on that yet?
Are they working?
Yes.
Are they?
What do you mean by
They're running?
advertising?
They're running.
The other day I was in there and I didn't see them running. So.
Oh, I know why.
Okay, I don't have any other updates, so can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Pat Rennie?
Yeah.
Alan Ward?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes.
Thank you.